I'm Joseph Wolf, CEO of EFG Wealth Management Israel.
And I am Michael Dadoun, Head of Private Banking at EFG Wealth Management Israel.
And this is Market Makers IL, a financial podcast where we bring you conversations about shekels and stories about success in the Israeli market.
But let's be clear, this is not investment advice, and the conversations with our guests should not be taken as advice either.
All right, Michael, here we are alone in the studio, which is an odd feeling. We're going to try this with no guests. And you know what we're going to try and do today, we haven't really explained to people how we got here. We haven't really explained to people who we are. We've been using this podcast as a way to, give people in the business community in Israel an opportunity to tell their stories. And as we come to the end of season one, and maybe this will air at the end of season one or towards the end of season one, we haven't really told our story. So I'm going to throw it out there, and since I gave this little introduction, maybe you could start part of the story, and then we'll see where it takes us.
Sounds good. So how the podcast started? That's an interesting one. It always started at shul, right? So I was in a synagogue for I think I can't remember, but that was after the beginning of the war. It was for a Shabbat or something, and then I met there Hillel. Hillel Feld.
Who now everybody knows because he is a persona non grata in certain countries. But that's a story for another day. And
yes.
We're not political.
Yes,
we don't give investment advice, and we're not political.
Exactly. So I was at shul and I was like, hey, Hillel, you remember we were supposed to arrange a meeting, but then obviously the war started and everything got canceled. So he said, so let's do it again. So we arranged a meeting. I come back to the office. I talked to you, Joseph, and then we end up, around Sarona in a Bet Cafe. Basically, we started, talking about different ideas, and Hillel said, you guys should do some kind of like podcast, focusing on, local Israeli people, and then, generate a little bit more, I would say, content and views. And he's basically started sharing all kind of interesting ideas because he's a kind of like a specialist in all these things. And we took it from there. But the thing is, he told us, I give those kind of tips to most people. And they said, yeah, that's a great idea. We'll do it. But I can tell you in 6 months' time, I'll tell you where do you stand on this, and, nothing will happen. So we're different than...
To which I said, challenge accepted.
Exactly. So he said, challenge accepted. And, here we are. We took the challenge up. To be honest, credit to you. You found all the right partners to do this.
Yeah, you had guest one.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll get to that in a few minutes.
Okay. But eventually it all happened, and it all happened fast, like it does in Israel. Everything goes so fast, and we just do things. And pretty proud to say that the challenge has been accepted and done. And we've I think you've updated Hillel on that recently. So that was quite a cool way to see, from a basic conversation, having coffee in Sarona, throwing up ideas, and then here we are. We have, I don't know how many episodes now, like 8, I think.
And I have to say, when we left that meeting with Hillel, because, and you've got this experiences also, people like us who kind of grew up in our professions in these large global investment banks come to life, and part of this is for a very good reason, within this framework that it's much easier to say no than to say yes. And I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about our time together at EFG, in this new firm that we're at, which is much more of a boutique, 3,000 people, much less hierarchy, much more connectivity to the top, much more ability to make local decisions. I think we just kind of ran with it. And it's funny because I was at an offsite in Switzerland with some of the other managers in our boss's region, and they said, "Is Joe really allowed to do this?" And Frank was like, "Sure, of course he's allowed to do this." He talked to a couple people, he got some permission, and here we are. So to everybody out there who's trying to push the envelope a little bit, I think when you have an idea like this and you can figure out the right framework, because look, we're not giving investment ideas. What's our largest concern? We're licensed. You don't want to give investment advice.
Right. We are licensed, we're regulated, so we don't want to give investment advice where we're not supposed to.
Exactly. We want to talk to our clients, and also we've got proprietary details that is for our clients. We view this podcast as a way for us to kind of tell people that we're here and we've got things for you when it's appropriate, but not to actually specifically broadcast any of our views at this time. Because again, what we're trying to accomplish here, and I think that and we'll go through some of this, what I hope we've accomplished in season 1 is demonstrating two things. One is that there is a huge amount of talent in the workplace in Israel, and we've scratched the surface. We've talked to family officers, we've talked to entrepreneurs, we've talked to lawyers, we've talked to VCs, we've talked to people who work for multinational global companies in their marketing departments. And so I think when you look at who's situated here, we've learned a lot. We've met a lot of great people. And the second thing that has really come through, I think, which, given what the country's been through in the last 2 years, is this incredible amount of optimism about the future and about the talent that everybody who we've spoken to works with on a daily basis.
Absolutely. I think that was, I think that's one of the main takeaways. First of all, the quality of the people in Israel. Some of them are not Israeli first generation. They grew up outside of Israel. And that was quite impressive to see, to get to meet those people, the amount of resilience, optimism, as you said, and the actual diversity of those people across the different industries. That's something that I really, really enjoyed meeting those people, to be honest with you.
So here's a question, I think, which might be interesting to some people, and that is, the two of us sitting here, you've got a guy like me. I grew up in the Midwest, moved to Israel about 20 years ago, was educated on the East Coast in New York, and spent my career in equity research. And I'm sitting across the table from my partner in business, who grew up in North Africa, was educated, who speaks 3 languages. It makes me sound like an idiot every single day. 5 languages. I barely speak 1 language. Sitting across the table from me. So how did explain a little bit about how we got here today and how we've built this, what I think is an interesting partnership as we build this business together.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's fascinating how the paths are crossing. So we met at Credit Suisse. When I had been working there for some time, and then you joined as CEO of Credit Suisse.
I want to just interject with something funny here, because when I was interviewing for that job, I did not meet anybody in the office, and I think that was by design from our manager. And I remember her announcing this appointment, and I was in New York because at the time I was spending a lot of time in New York. So I remember taking this call with you. It was early morning in New York. I was in this apartment that I had rented there because I was working so much time there. And I'm talking to you for the first time. You have no idea who I am. We're trying to figure out if we should speak in English or Hebrew. I've been airlifted into the team. And now tell us your impressions about what happened there.
That's right. I can't remember. I don't really remember that call, but what I remember is that a week before you joined, you come to the office to say hello. You're there for like a few minutes, and then you leave. And the following day, we're being told that you got COVID, so everybody's got to go work from home.
I gave everybody.
So I was like, I hate that guy already.
I gave everybody work from home. It's true. It was the tail end of COVID. Somebody got me sick. I actually know how I got sick.
So I was like,
put everybody in quarantine, and then I went on vacation.
I was like, who's that guy? But that's how it started. Then eventually, we got to get to work together. It got along pretty well. Actually, I have to say, it's interesting. I mean, you're Ashkenazi, I'm Sephardic from North Africa, from Morocco. You're from St. Louis, Missouri, spent most of your time in the US. And you're American and Moroccan. I mean, that's very interesting. But eventually, I mean, I think the one thing we got in common from a career perspective is that we started in investment banking in one of those large firms, and we actually worked from some of the same firms. And I also worked at some point very closely with research analysts. So I kind of like, I know it's probably...
what kind of crazy I might bring to the table.
I know it's probably the hardest, one of the hardest jobs on Wall Street. So from that, obviously you're getting a lot of respect from me. I know those guys were working all the time, and that's interesting how we ended up in private banking. So I ended up private banking a little bit, before you, but then eventually we managed to bring those kind of skills from our different career path, and I think that's what makes it like a very interesting combination for our clients. I think it's interesting how we kind of like sort of like run that business together, not overstepping over each other's roles, and that's what makes it like a pretty good and nice way to kind of build this thing that we're building together. It's languages is not really is not really important, as long as I think everybody agrees that English is the global language, and the rest is just like a bonus.
What I think, we both spent a lot of time at big banks, and we could tell the story about how we ended up at EFG, but that might be for a different time. But maybe we'll talk a little bit about EFG. But what I think is interesting, and maybe we should start there, is we talked to I've spent a lot of time in my career speaking to startups. And there's part of you, you go to these strip malls somewhere on the West Coast, or you end up in Herzliya, and you walk into these companies, and you're meeting people and these entrepreneurs, and these guys walking around in shorts and T-shirts, and you're at best dressed like this. This is dressed down in some ways. And you're like, wow, would it be really, I've always worked in these big towers. What would it be like to be, kind of coming to work like this in these little strip malls, trying to see what's going on? And yet, when we moved from Credit Suisse to EFG, we actually created a startup in Israel.
Oh, definitely.
And so to me, I've finally at the point, and and it's hard. We're finally at that point where, we've left the big bank, we're at the small bank, and this franchise is supported significantly by our parent company in Switzerland. And we've gotten all the support you could possibly ask for in a very trying time in Israel. But let's be honest, this is us.
Absolutely. This is us. I mean, we've seen like so many things that we've done. We got the idea and we did it. Okay, we got a couple of approvals from Switzerland and on the way, but actually this is definitely very much an entrepreneurial, I would say, adventure, which is also very much in line with the Israel, perspective. And that's what makes it like really, really cool and really exciting. So yes, we are still doing private banking for a Swiss bank listed company, but it's a totally different, I would say, perspective and dynamic, which is making it, in my view, very, very exciting every day.
This is really, and so I think one of the reasons that we did this podcast, and we don't do this enough, and it's sticking here in the middle of the episode, but I just thought of it, so I'm going to say, we really need to thank this team at Dabru who has helped us take this
For sure.
take this German idea and actually put it onto something where there's reels and there's videos and there's subtitles and there's actually something to there's actually some content out there that people can listen to. And so our thanks to Daniela, to Michael, to everybody who's helped us out here, and so we really appreciate that. What I think I've been thinking about is, it might be interesting, is obviously we're not going to, we don't pitch EFG a lot on this podcast, but I think it'd be interesting for our listeners to hear, you as the head of private banking, just talk to, when you go see a client, and this is true for a lot of startups get asked, what are you doing differently? What's your good idea? How are you not a commodity? I think hearing from you why we think we're not a commodity in a business where there are a lot of where there is a lot of competition would be an interesting thing for our listeners to hear.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I often say that the reason clients would be working with EFG as a banking partner are very similar to the reason why I myself working there as an employee. I think having gone through investment banking and private banking and already a few institutions, I kind of get to see the difference between the different banks, the big ones and the smaller ones. And it might be this all comes down to 3 or 4 points. But the main one is, first of all, it's a people's business. So it's about the people you're working with, the people you're building the relationship with, and the people who actually care about you as a client. Once you build, trust is being built over time, but you can already feel, you can see why people like to work with us. and our team, because we really care about clients longer term. Because you can care about your clients short term, but longer term, you build something. You're here for the long run, and you're not looking after short-term results. That's something that the client actually can sense. They can feel it. Now, EFG itself, I would say, is you need to tick a few boxes. It is a commodity business. A lot of the banks offer similar things, but you need to tick a few boxes. One of them is that EFG is a bank you can sleep well at night. When you look at the balance sheet, when you look at how strong it is, how the impressive growth it's been experiencing.
I remember those conversations we had, not to jump in. Remember those conversations we had to have of trying to defend the balance sheet of the organization we worked for? Not fun.
I haven't done that since I've joined EFG, to be honest. And it's a very nice feeling to not have to worry about, what are we going to read in the newspapers about, our employer. So that is a great feeling to know that the bank is solid and you can sleep well at night with, all the right indicators, not getting into the details like core tier 1 ratios and ratings and stuff like that, but it all, it ranks pretty well. It's a top 5, top 6 bank if you look at the pure Swiss private banking assets. So where it's not like a huge one, like this kind of like very big bank, like one of our biggest competitors, but still top 5, top 6 in terms of assets, and this gives us enough. I would say a volume, enough power to kind of like offer everything a private banking client can need. So what's interesting here is that, so we are big, we're not too big. And as you mentioned, we're 3,000 employees, and it's also a very flat structure, meaning that we know the CEO directly. There is one manager between ourselves and the CEO. So this makes things very, very easy to navigate, very efficient, very fast processes, which to me as an employee who's working with clients every day makes it like very, very nice to kind of to navigate. So we've talked about the people, we've talked about the bank. Products are amazing. The platform is fantastic. We have one of the best platforms for structured products. We have a great offering for what we call alternative investments, which is something that Israeli people and in general clients do like a lot. So this is an exciting platform. Enough, I would say the menu is big enough for people to find the right solutions, no matter what the risk or the size is. So that's kind of like very interesting to work with. And obviously, terms and conditions are also quite attractive. So all in all, I think we tick all the boxes to provide the right feeling, the right platform for our clients, which can be any client. It can be like high net worth individuals, they can be corporates, they can be, trusts and all these kind of things, as long as you need wealth management solutions. I think we have the right team that can do it all from here on the ground. So that's also very, very convenient for our clients here.
It's interesting because, I think we're at the point where we're going to bridge into some of the things we've learned from our guests over the course of this season. But one of the things that came up with our first guest, and it's one of the things I think is really interesting, and it goes to the commodity question, and it goes to the Swiss banking system, is, our purpose in being in Israel as a Swiss bank is to offer to the appropriate client base products and services that are not necessarily standard for all of their daily needs at the local level. And so I think it's easy to put that, you can frame that in many different ways. And I prefer, generally speaking, I was a sell-side analyst, and they say sell-side analysts always have more buys than holds. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that, and that's not this podcast. But I generally am an optimist. And so I think I'm not going to look at this as the negative reasons. The positive reasons for our customers to be looking for our product and services is, and I said this to my wife, we went up north for a little bit of we did a little half-day trip up, not even north, we went up to the Zichron area. We went to, and I walked out to the parking lot after we had lunch, and I'm like, you know what? this is not the Israel we visited when we were kids. Now, mind you, I'm an old man at this point, so I was here in the early 80s. You did not see Porsches and Land Rovers. You saw Mercedes because they were cabs. This is now a really rich country. Look, there's work to do, and it hasn't filtered down to all of the population. And there's plenty of things for our culture and our country to be working on to kind of bring everybody up. But I think the opportunities here are first world, and that has to extend to every aspect of life. And that means people who have achieved a certain degree of success need to be offered the same sorts of products and services that people have achieved that degree of success anywhere are able to access. And so I think that that's really why Swiss banking has succeeded. And the second part was a strong piece that Karen really brought home, and that is, and one of the founders of EFG's, one of the family members mentioned this at an offsite in Interlaken just recently. The Swiss banking system is well regulated and transparent. And those two things coming together let people, like you said, sleep at night when their money is there and when it's being managed by people who bring them long-term solutions and care. And so I think that was my big takeaway from at least episode 1. You know, why is every Swiss bank here? Why are we showing why are we so confident that we're going to be successful? And I think that part of it is because the product that we're bringing people is a grade A premium product.
For sure. I mean, I think Israeli people today, first of all, it's a global world. You're not like anymore 100% local. Those businessmen, those entrepreneurs, they're constantly on planes and traveling around the world with a very, very global life. Therefore, Swiss banking is bringing that global aspects in terms of wealth management. And when you're global, you deserve the best, as you say, like anybody else elsewhere in the world. And that's why Israeli people are in this market getting more and more exposed to global services, including private banking.
So let's jump around now. We talked about episode 1. Off the top of your head, we've had 8 guests. We talked about what they spanned. You never ask people certain things in life. You never ask people what their favorite is because you don't like to rank things that you love. But an event or an episode or a comment that somebody gave you that really stuck out that we might want to get into a little bit.
I really enjoyed with the episode with David Schwartz.
That was a great one.
And the PepsiCo story with the different challenges he had to go through being here locally, working for such a huge organizations, and you realize sometimes Israel may not be the focus area, and he basically managed to convince them that there is actually something great to be done here, and he's done the work. He worked really hard on this. And eventually there was a huge success, and he was exposed to the top management of the team. I mean, we're talking about PepsiCo. We're not talking about a small company. And
yeah, we've got 3,000. We've got 3,000 colleagues. Yeah. He has 300,000 colleagues.
So that was, I thought I was like truly impressive, because if you think about the amount of sales that they make in Israel, it's probably negligible relative to other huge markets in the world. But he managed to make it super interesting for this firm. And I thought that was a fascinating story, actually.
Yeah, and of course, he did have the most fascinating and unattainable snack food answer to our 4 questions, which was the hot potato chip right out of the fryer. Where this is something we can all aspire to, but I think we'd have to bring him. We'd have to put on the hairnet, the fishnet hats, go through the factory and try and get one of those.
So what was yours?
Look, I think he was great because he stayed on brand. I come back to two women who I think really. Actually, we had 3 young women on the show who actually taught me different things about staying on point and brand. It starts with, Michal Fisher was one of our guests, and she is a real whiz in the healthcare sector. And I think her ability to explain, to contribute, to navigate the whole healthcare ecosystem in Israel was really impressive to me. And so I think I learned a lot there.
For sure.
I spent a lot of time in my career storytelling because in the end, equity research is is storytelling.
It's storytelling with numbers.
With numbers.
Yeah.
And you hope you get the story right. And I used to tell people, if you get the story right and you get the stock wrong, you're still kind of a good analyst. If you get the story wrong and the stock right, you could get credit. But if you get the story wrong and you get the stock wrong, you really haven't done your job.
That's right.
So, and from different approaches, we had Brachi Sprung on, and she has spent a lot of time at a couple different VCs and in politics talking about messaging. And I think that her ability to explain in real detail how important it is to be upfront with good news and even with bad news to the people who are your stakeholders and shareholders really left a really deep impression on me. And then, and we had Nicole Priel on, who spent a lot of time she worked at Ion, she worked at IBEX, and now she's starting her own thing. I think some of the slides are out there. I won't pre-announce what she's working on, but you could tell from the podcast that she's very focused on the B2C end markets. And I think her ability to look at a situation and explain how it's not just product, but it's marketing, it's brand, it's audience. It's how do you take this idea and turn it into something which is usable, sellable, growable as a business. Those were a couple of lessons that I learned that I think are applicable to almost anybody trying to do something in the market.
Yeah, I mean those are absolutely great episodes. I mean all of them were really good actually. When you think about it, everybody has his own specificity, and I thought it was super interesting. Like with Chaim Friedland, for example, that was also quite cool. He's a lawyer, and lawyer can be seen as sometimes boring, but he was absolutely fascinating. He also grew up in the US like you, right? And he's worked on some of the top, deals like Israeli deals. He's leading a great team in one of the biggest law firms in Israel, and he's got so many interesting stories. I thought that one was actually quite fascinating about the optimism about the Israeli market, and he also talked about the importance of the similarities as opposed to differences. I thought that a lot of very, very strong messages there.
Look, you don't have to convince me. Chaim, I think, is one of the most well-liked and well-known lawyers in Israel, and I've known him for a long time.
And the level of energy, that's powerful.
He's not that cut and dry lawyer. He's the guy you want to work with.
Yes.
And I think, the one we didn't mention, which I think is one of our entrepreneurs, and I thought it was really fascinating, was Omri DeCalo from Ubeya, which is just this fascinating technology.
Yeah.
And you ask people, like the origin story of that was, I'm working with catering companies to figure out if I can get the staffing right for a little wedding in Israel. And now Wimbledon is this week, isn't it? You're the tennis guy.
Yeah,
it's this week, right?
Yeah,
it was already
just started. Yeah,
already a big upset, if I'm not mistaken, of the American.
Wimbledon is exactly. Yeah, well done.
So there you go. And Ubeya is powering the temporary staffing at Wimbledon, which is just an amazing thing for an Israeli startup to be part of that. And so, I'm going to conclude this way, and then I'm going to ask for your conclusion. If I think about this, we started this podcast to really highlight, showcase, demonstrate the variety of talent that we've got in the local market. And I think from a small family office to a large multinational with hundreds of thousands of employees, I think the thing that stands out the most from all the people we've met is they're actually all entrepreneurs when you think about it. And you can be entrepreneurial in any setting when you're trying to grow a business and take it to the next level.
They are entrepreneurial, they are optimists, they are resilient, they are flexible, they adapt to a reality that is constantly changing. I mean, this is the definition of an entrepreneur. And I think that was really the common ground between all of them.
So we got lucky, we got good guests.
Yeah.
So now we've got to end our little wrap up though with the 4 questions, because we can't ask people 4 questions and not subject ourselves to the same test. And so you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
You can go first.
All right, Michael, what's the worst career advice you ever received?
Worst career advice, I would say, sometimes, and sometimes working in banking, when you're results oriented, you're told to go for the short-term wins. And because that's what management is mostly interested in, because, you want to bring the wins. And I think it's not a good advice. And especially in private banking, when you realize that over the long term, the trust you build with your clients is much more important than short-term wins. And this is what I'm trying to focus on. Sometimes it takes a bit more time, but eventually it pays off. And, clients are not stupid. People are not stupid. They feel it. And this is where really you can cement the trust with your clients.
Agreed.
So that was a bad advice.
Business icon?
So I heard you said business icon and not sports icon, but yet I'm going to say Roger Federer. You know why?
He's a business icon.
He's a business icon to me. He's probably worth more than 1 billion.
It's a franchise.
He's made probably 100 to 150 million from playing tennis. The rest is made off court. So to me, he's definitely a business icon.
I'll take that. Favorite Israeli snack food?
I love going to the Shuk Levinsky market every Friday, and I buy those salted cashew nuts and salted almonds. And now I think I'm addicted to them. So if you come to my place, you'll always have fresh cashew and almonds.
And the last thing you changed your mind about?
I don't know if it's the last thing, but I think initially I was coming from, business school and banking and things like that. You think that when you have a strong control and knowledge about your numbers, your technical skills and all these things, that's the most important to kind of like convince anybody around the table. And over time, I've realized that actually soft skills, empathy, listening, those kind of skills are actually probably sometimes more important when you deal with your clients. So I've probably over the years I've changed my mind about soft skills versus hard skills.
That's a really good one. I tell people I studied engineering in my first degree. I studied finance in my second degree. I never took a single psychology course in my life. And now that's all I do all day. So
exactly.
Well played. So now I guess it's my turn. And I do have the advantage of having created the questions and having asked the questions. I'm going to let you ask them to me. And I have to say, though, it still wasn't so easy for me to think about these. Yes. And I've had time.
It's not easy. So let's start with the question you just asked me. Last thing you changed your mind about.
The last thing I changed my mind about was Bitcoin.
Okay.
I admit I don't understand Bitcoin. And somebody said to me, actually, she used to work at the Bank of Israel. She's like, I was speaking to a colleague and he said to me, Bitcoin is like God. Some people don't believe in it, but a lot of people do. And so it's there and it's not going away. So that's kind of that was kind of what got me thinking. And then I was like, well, I'm too old and too conservative to really just go out there and buy some Bitcoin. But then I heard about a way to get there. And so I won't give any investment advice or say exactly how I got there, but I did manage to figure out a way to have exposure without doing anything crazy. And so I now have some exposure to Bitcoin. And that is the last thing I changed my mind about.
Interesting. I'm actually about to change my mind about it as well. So that's a good one. Worst business advice you received in your career?
So I was an equity analyst in the TMT bubble. And I was covering a stock which was one of the highest...
TMT is technology,
media, and telecom. And I was covering a very high-flying stock in the optical communication space. And I was a young analyst who had been given responsibility for covering the sector, which was really a high flyer. And as we all know, that all broke in October 2000, and NASDAQ started to fall apart. And as an analyst, you're always like, well, should I keep the buy rating? When do I downgrade? Is all the bad news in the stock? And I was about to downgrade a stock, and I wrote the downgrade report, and I get a call from I won't mention any names or the firm I was at, the global head of the investment committee, who was a really senior and important guy. And he's like, Joe, if you downgrade this stock here, you'll be making the biggest mistake of your career. And you know what? I listened. And he was totally wrong because there was still 60 or 70% downside left, and I totally blew it. Wow. Worst advice I ever listened to, and I received it, and I took it, and it was a big mistake.
Well, at least you learned from that.
Exactly.
Your business icon.
This is really personal. I have been blessed throughout my career to have had very, very good bosses across almost every stage of my career. And when I moved to Wall Street, my first boss was a guy named Nikos Theodosopoulos, whose name I can still spell in my sleep if pressed, because of all the conference calls I had to dial in his name as we were listening to the earnings calls. But Nikos was the greatest boss ever because he never yelled. he just expressed to you the kind of disappointment that you just didn't get it right or you didn't listen and you never made the same mistake twice. He gave us enough flexibility to really develop into our jobs. He trusted us. And I think most importantly, he realized as a boss that we were never going to steal his thunder. And so he gave us responsibility with clients very, very, very early. There were other analysts, senior analysts, who said to the juniors, I talk to all the clients. And Nikos was like, if I'm on the phone with a client and there's another client on the line, you talk to him, I trust you. And you knew sometimes he even picked up the line and listened to you. And so you really got nervous then. But he had enough faith in us, and he knew two things. He knew that he had trained us well enough to get it right, and he also knew that the client coming to us was not taking away from his success with the clients, but it was expanding his success with the clients. And that's a lesson that really stuck with me across most of my career. So Nikos was one of my best mentors.
Great. Well, last but not least, your favorite Israeli food or snack food?
I'm going for a real throwback, and I'm going to say the very, very modest Egozi bar.
Good enough.
And with that, I think we have concluded our season wrap for season 1.